Now, it's Pei Shabbos, we read Pasha Zohar, always the Shabbos before Purim, because the whole concept of the Purim, the Megillah, we'll discuss in a moment. When we read the Megillah, the narrative from the beginning till the very end, clearly articulates the whole representation of what Amalek is. They are the opposing force to the existence of the Jewish people, as Haman was able to extract a decree from Achashverosh when he gave him that ring to annihilate every man, woman, and child. There should not be one solitary Jew left on the face of the earth. This is a manifestation of what took place at the after Kriyas Yam Suf, how they attacked us. So again, the reading of Megillah is a manifestation of the level of intolerance that there's no coexistence between Amalek and Jewish people. That's the story. Now, there's a discussion. There's a principle that any mitzvah obligation, which a man and woman are of equal standing, a woman could cover a man. For instance, let's say a woman Friday night is obligated in Kiddush no less than a man. Therefore, if a man is not able to say Kiddush, a woman is able to say Kiddush on his behalf, because the obligation are on par of equal standing. But let's say a woman's obligation is less, or a woman's not obligated whatsoever. A woman cannot cover a man because her obligation is a lesser obligation. So the question is, the Gemara says in Megillah that not only is a man obligated in the reading of the Megillah, but even a woman is obligated in the reading of the Megillah. Why? Because the women were beneficiaries of the miracle no less than the men, even though we normally say that any time-oriented mitzvah, where time dictates the obligation of women is exempt, but over here, this is an exception, because the women were beneficiaries of the miracle. Because just as the decree was to annihilate every man, the same decree was to annihilate every woman. Therefore, the woman has to hear the Megillah at night and during the daytime, no less than the man. So many people make a mistake. They think women, they go the nighttime reading. The woman's obligation is not only the nighttime reading, it's even the daytime reading. No less than the man has that obligation. As the man has an obligation to eat Suras Purim, to eat the meal of the feast of Purim, a woman has no less of an obligation. It's not enough to have the feast at nighttime. Not only that, there's no obligation at all. Suras Purim is during the daytime. It's not at nighttime whatsoever. Okay? So seemingly, a woman should be able to read the Megillah on behalf of a man. Seemingly, that's what should be. But yet, there's a position known as the Bahag, the Baal Lochos Gedolos, who's an early commentator, rules that a woman is not able to cover a man at his obligation. So Tosas has a difficulty with this, but since the Gemara says that because they were beneficiaries no less than the male, so our obligations are on par, why can't a woman cover a man? That's Tosas' question on the Bahag, on the Baal Lochos Gedolos. And therefore Tosas disagrees. And he's of the opinion that a woman can read the Megillah. If a man is not able to read Megillah on his own behalf, a woman is able to read Megillah on his behalf. However, how do we understand the Bahag? So the way it's explained is this way. There's a position of the Chinuch, who's a codifier, who usually goes according to the position of Rambam, who writes that there are two mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah, Schiras Mechias Amalek, which we read last week. We fulfilled that mitzvah. Remember what Amalek had done to us when we left Egypt. And then there's a mitzvah of Mechias Amalek, to destroy them, obliterate them from under the heaven. There's a mitzvah to remember, there's a mitzvah to obliterate. So the Chinuch explains that the only reason why there's a mitzvah to remember is because there's a mitzvah to obliterate. Meaning we have to recall, and it has to be fresh in our minds, what they wanted to do to us, so that understanding of what they represent is so fresh in our minds, therefore we're going to obliterate them. Of course, time passes, we forget. So to always keep that in mind, who they are, never to forget that. Therefore, we're always in a position, it's always in the forefront of our minds to obliterate them. And since Noshim Lav Benos Milchama, since a woman is not warfaring, a woman doesn't go to war, as a result of that, a woman has no obligation to remember what they had done to us, because the objective of remembering is to destroy, to obliterate them. But since a woman has no obligation to destroy them, therefore a woman has no obligation to remember what they had done to us. That's the chinuch. So according to the chinuch, a woman has no obligation to hear the reading of Parsha Zohar, because the value, the objective is to remember what they had done to us. That's the chinuch. So there's a person known as the Marcheshes. He lived before World War II. He writes, so it comes out, the reading Megillah has a dual value. The Gemara says, reading Megillah is presuming Nisa. As we light Hanukkah lights, we light them to publicize the miracle. Reading the narrative from the beginning till the end, it's to publicize the miracle what Hashem had done to us. We're really at the brink of extinction, and at the last moment, v'napachu. Things changed, and not they didn't destroy us, we destroyed them. So that's presuming Nisa. But simultaneously, reading that narrative, we're also fulfilling on a rabbinical level the mitzvah of Zechiris Mechis Amalek, to remember what Amalek had done to us. Haman being a descendant of Agag, he was the one who Shaul did not kill. Therefore, to remember that, it's to remember that, so we should destroy them. So what comes out when we read the Megillah has a dual value. One value is presuming Nisa, publicizing the miracle. The other value is Zechiris Mechis Amalek. So when a woman reads the Megillah, what is her obligation? Her obligation is only presuming Nisa. However, man's obligation is embedded in that reading is also what? Is also Zechiris Mechis Amalek, to remember that. So since a woman is not obligated in that component of the mitzvah, when she reads the Megillah, she cannot cover the man in his obligation, which that reading represents Zechiris Mechis Amalek. Therefore, a woman cannot cover a man in the reading, but a woman can only cover a woman. A man can cover a woman in the reading because the reading has that dual value. Presuming Nisa, Zechiris Mechis Amalek. So it doesn't detract from presuming Nisa. But the woman who only has the obligation of presuming Nisa to publicize the miracle and does not have the other component, therefore she's not able to cover the male in his obligation. That's how the Marcheshes explains the Bahag, why the Bahag rules a woman cannot cover a man, although the Gemara says, they were beneficiaries of the miracle. That's only in regard to, therefore they have to publicize it to be appreciative for what Hashem had done on behalf of them and behalf of the men. Same thing. But there's the other aspect of it, that a woman is not obligated, therefore a woman cannot cover a man.
All right, Rabbi.
First, explicitly, the way that Chinuch explains what the Torah is actually saying. Remember to obliterate. That's the Torah obligation. If you want to read it because you want to maintain in your mind that it should be a representation of remembering what evil not to forget, that's your prerogative. But that's not what the Chazal, rabbinically, what was legislated. What was promulgated it is to remember to obliterate. Because that's the Torah mitzvah. The Torah says, why should you remember? To destroy. That is, so on a rabbinical level, we read the Megillah with the same objective, remember to destroy. But since a woman is not warfaring, she has no obligation. You want to read it, but in terms of the level of obligation, a woman is not obligated to remember because the objective of remembering is to destroy. You want to read it to remember and always be clear in your mind what evil is, more power to you. But that's not going to cover a man because a man's obligation is not to remember what evil is. The objective is remember what evil is to destroy evil.
I'm surprised.
I'm sure in Chabad they learned this Haftorah, that the story of Sisera, he was the Syrian general who Barak and Dvorah, they went to war with 10,000 men against the Assyrians, and he fled. They would destroy the Assyrians, and Yoel went and took a stake gave him some wine and milk to drink. He fell asleep, and when he was sleeping, she took the stake of the tent and she hammered it through a temple of his head, and that's how she killed him. So the Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel, who's a Tana, Yonasan ben Uziel, who's the great student of Hillel, Hazokin explains, why didn't she take a sword and just decapitate him? Why did she take the stake of the tent and put it through his temple to kill him? So he explains that a woman is not supposed to behave like a man. For instance, it says, Lo silbash isha sinlas gever. A woman's not permitted to wear a man's clothing. As a man is not permitted to wear a woman's clothing. That means the manner of a woman has to be like a woman, and the manner of a man should be like a man. Who uses a sword to fight off an enemy? A man. A man goes to war. A woman doesn't. Therefore, using a sword to decapitate him, that's the behavior of a man. Therefore, she would have been, of course, it was pikuach nefesh. But since she had a choice and she was able to end his life by taking the stake of the tent and hammer it through his temple, that's why she chose that, not a sword. Of course, if she would have used the sword, that's the little silbash isha sinless gever. That's the manner of a man. That's the way of a man. That's the reason. To that degree. So it's the same concept. If a woman would be warfaring, using a sword is no different than a man using a sword. But since she's not, therefore, and the remembering is for that purpose, therefore she's absolved. You want to remember for your reason, that's, as we say, gesundheit, that's your prerogative. But that's not what the Chazal legislated, which is what's embedded in the reading and the value of the reading. Therefore, a woman cannot cover a man for that reason. Obligation, anybody who rises, God forbid, to kill you, you have an obligation to defend yourself, to save your life. That's a bar l'hok hashkim hargo. If God forbid a man attacks a woman, whatever way she's able to defend herself and save her life, she kills her attacker, whether it's a gun, a sword, whatever it is. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about going to war. Let's say there's nobody who could go to war. The only person that's able to go to war, women are the only people who are able to defend the compound. Of course, the women do it. But if you have it, but as an obligation, as a Torah obligation, or in reality, women were not conscripted. Women were not conscripted into the war effort in the Torah. Right? It's only males, not women. As a result of that, as the Chinuch explains, the only reason you remember is for that reason. That is the obligation of remembering, that's the Torah obligation. You want to remember for the sake of remembering what evil is, as they said, more power to you. That's okay. But that's not what this is about. Because after Kriyas Yamsuf, after the splitting of the sea, this nomad band of people, Amalek attacked us. And Hashem says, because they attacked us, Zoches Asher Osul Amalek. It says, if they ever remember what Amalek did to us when we left Egypt, and Hashem says, therefore, you should obliterate them from under the heavens, and Ki al Kesio. And Rashi explains, my throne is not complete until they're obliterated from under the heavens. Now the question is, they attacked us. We fended ourselves, we beat them off. Okay. I mean, is that a reason God says? That's an indication of the evil, what they are, what they represent, and therefore they deserve to be literally annihilated to the point there's not one sole survivor. And Hashem says, my throne is not complete until they no longer exist. Because they weren't touched by Kriyas Yamsuf as all the other nations were touched. I mean, why is it such a calamity? They did the wrong thing. They're bad people. But to such a degree that the throne of Hashem is actually destabilized. Why? That's the question. The way I explained it at one time at a simple level and a more profound level. So simple is this way. Rashi and Kiseitze cites a medrash. When we were attacked by Amalek, you have a scalding bath, and everybody's afraid to approach the bath because they're going to get burnt. And you have this one unstable person goes and jumps into the bath. and he gets burnt. But even though he got burnt, but factually, now the bath becomes approachable. People are not afraid to approach the bath any longer. We read in those Yoshir that Alufi, the princes of Edom, they trembled. They were a little paralyzed with fear when they saw what Hashem had done to the Egyptians on behalf of the Jewish people. People were afraid. There was like an aura. Amalek went and they burst that bubble. They took away that aura. If that aura would have remained in place, what do the Jewish people represent? We are the Am Hashem. We are God's people. What God does for us, he does for no one else. And therefore, people, that would have been a model of that special nation, and people would have gravitated, and eventually people would have acknowledged and rejected paganism because of this. And ultimately, the world would have come to its level of perfection. Amalek prevented that because they burst the bubble, that aura was removed. Therefore, Hashem says, if not for Amalek, my throne would have been complete, because ultimately the world would have gravitated in that direction. But now that they went and they attacked you, and now the Jews are approachable, they don't represent that any longer. That's the way I explained it in the past. The way I explained it differently, a much more profound level. The Medrash says, we find that the Luchos Rishonos, the first set of tablets, were given publicly. But at the time of the giving of Torah at Sinai, the whole world knew that the Jews were chosen by God to become his people, to receive the Luchos, the first set of tablets. What happens? Because the Chet Egel, they were smashed, they were broken. 120 days later, on Yom Kippur, Moshe comes down with a second set of tablets. When he came back down with the second set of tablets, it was done on the QT. It wasn't a public event. The first event was globally public. The second event was very private. Moshe Rabbeinu comes down. You've been reinstated. We continue to go. Why was the second one done, relatively speaking, private, and the first one was public? So the Medrash says, why did the Jewish people, why did we sin with the golden calf? We sinned with the golden calf that since it was a public event, the world gave the Jewish people an ayin hara. They gave us the evil eye. Because they gave us the evil eye, therefore we sinned. Therefore we were confronted with that challenge of the Chet Egel, because of the evil eye. As a result of that, that's why the Luchas Shniyos, the second set of tablets, were given on the QT. Were given this private setting. What does it mean? They gave us the evil eye, and that caused us. That created the challenge of the Chet Egel. What does that mean? It means this. We know that we have Midas Adin, Midas Arachmin, the attribute of justice, the attribute of mercy. Attribute of mercy says, every day in Birchas Hashach we say, we ask Hashem not to bring us lo di soyo, lo di vizoyo. We ask Hashem not to test us, because you never know if you're going to survive the test. So whenever a person is tested, especially on a very extreme level, that's due to Midas Adin. That's Midas Adin. Hashem is putting you against the wall. And what activates that is Ayin Hara. Ayin Hara activates Midas Adin. For instance, the Gemara tells us, we had above Metzia, that 99% of people who die, when Rav went to the cemetery, looked at the cemetery, he says 99% of the people in the cemetery died because of Ayin Hara. What do you mean they died because of Ayin Hara? This person died because he fell off a roof. This person had cancer. This person had a heart attack. Has nothing to do with Ayin Hara. No. No one's record is perfect. But nevertheless, even though it's as imperfect as the record is, we continue. Why? Because there's Midas Arachmin. Midas Ayin Hara activates that audit. Once you have an audit, nobody is free of sin. Therefore, you never know how that's going to end up. Because the audit takes place, therefore it's decided person should have a heart attack, die of cancer, be killed, whatever it is. That's what Rab says. 99% of the people in the cemetery are victims of Ayin Hara, because the Ayin Hara activated the attribute of justice. Therefore, the ruling, the psak, the verdict was they should die. That's the understanding. Because this event was public, there was that jealousy, which caused that Ayin Hara, that evil eye. Therefore, it was decided the challenge should be the Chet Egel. That caused that activated, that precipitated the Chet Egel. We should be challenged with that. And because it was a very serious challenge, as a result of that, we failed. But if it would have been done initially on the QT, it would have never happened. We wouldn't have not been confronted with that challenge. Now, in the 10 Commandments, there's a negative commandment of a losach mode. A person is not permitted to have designs on his fellow's property, on his wife, his property, his animal, whatever it may be. So there's a famous word from the Ibn Ezra. The Ibn Ezra asks, if a person is envious of someone else, and you want to have what he has, how do you control that? Not to steal, I'm able to control it. Not to injure a person, damage a person. I don't want to give charity, I can force myself to give tzedakah. Not observe Shabbos, I could restrain myself. Everything. But lo sachmot, not to have designs person's property because you feel you should have what the other person has, how do you control it? That's the question which is asked. If it explains it this way, every person in life has an objective, has a destiny, and that destiny is to determine and to bring about your level of perfection, to perfect your neshama in this world. All the challenges are tailor-made. Each person has his tailor-made challenges. Because each challenge, if you succeed, what is the end result? Shleimus, perfection. So what one person's challenge is not necessarily another person's challenge. The challenge is all determined by, it's very individualized. It's based on the spiritual makeup of your neshama. And only God knows. Therefore, each person's situation is tailor-made specifically for him. So why does this person have wealth and the other person doesn't have wealth? Because that person has different kinds of challenges. The person who doesn't have the wealth, he has other challenges. As a result of this, he gives an example. You have a princess. The woman who's of royalty, who's beautiful, who's poised, who's intelligent, who's cultured, that woman, it's known, she's not available for the commoner. For the common subject of the king. But because she's only available to the prince. Nobody's envious of the prince that he could take this woman as his wife because she's beyond reach, because you understand you're not royalty. Understand that clearly, that it's beyond it's not within your sphere of existence. There's no envy. Envy is only when you have designs, when you believe you should have what the other person has. We're peers, we're equal. If he has, why shouldn't I have? But if you understand that person has because he's a different echelon of society, he's royalty. I'm not royalty, there's no envy. This is the Ibn Ezra. He says, he takes it to an extreme. Is a person envious that a bird could fly and you can't fly? No, a bird's a bird, you're not a bird. This person's royalty, what's available to him is not available to you. But each person identically, each person individualized, he has what he has because that's what he's supposed to have. And you don't have what he has because you have a different destiny. Therefore, your objective is perfection, but your challenges are based upon your spiritual makeup. As a result of that, understanding that, there's no envy. He has what he has, I have what I have. Why does he have? Because he needs that for himself. Give you an example. Person has a prescription. It's $5,000 a dose of this medication because he has a certain type of cancer. You have to have means to be able to afford that kind of prescription. This other guy, thank God he's healthy. All he has to eat is bread and water, and he's healthy. He has no medical issues. Is he envious? This person can pay. He has the means to buy that kind of medication because he needs that prescription. He has a need. Because of his medical condition, he needs that medication, that infusion of medication. There's no jealousy. It's a different reality. He says a person would know this. There's no love sachmot. No, there's no envy that you have the reason to have designs. Okay? So he says so that's what he says. So this is what I said. Initially, after Kriyas Yamsuf, what did the world understand? So the Medrash says, what Hashem did to the world, to the enemies, to the people who are opposed to his existence, he never did before. So why did he do what he did to them? Why did he destroy the Egyptians? Because he says, because they enslaved my children. Because they went and enslaved my children. That's why my reaction was to destroy them. The world understand that God put us on a pedestal, understanding the world should understand who we are, who they're not. We are princes. We are B'nai Malachim. So when God would have given the Torah to us, the world's not jealous of us. We are the son of the king. We are the prince. Therefore, what we're worthy of, the world is not worthy of. But when Amalek attacked us, what did they do? They reduced us to a peer level. When they reduced us to a peer level, now the world understands. Why is God giving the Torah to the Jews? What about us? Why are we left out in the cold? As a result of that, that caused the Ayin Hora. That's the Ayin Hora. So what's it about? The Gemara says in Avodah Zarah, if we wouldn't have done the Chet Egel, we would have reverted, we did revert for a short period back to the sin of Adam. Death no longer had relevance to us. The world would have reached its level of perfection. There would have never been, evil would have come to an end at that moment. But because the Chet Egel, we reverted back to post-sin. Post-sin, the evil inclination's there. Chil Hashem goes forward. Challenges go forward. Man will fail until God brings it to an end. But it would have ended then. So why did it not end? Because there was envy. But why was the envy? Because Amalek attacked us. They reduced us to peer level. Therefore, there was a basis for Lo Sachmod. There was envy. Therefore, they're the cause of every Chil Hashem. The reason why Hashem's throne is not complete and it's destabilized is because what Amalek did to us when they attacked us, they were the cause of the Egel, because that was the envy which the world had, because they reduced us to that peer level. Actually, all very important. Okay. Moshe is in heaven receiving the first set of tablets, and Hashem says to Moshe, Lech reid kishich hasamcha. You must go down immediately. Your people became corrupted. So Moshe says to Hashem, my people, aren't they your people? He says, no, when I'm speaking your people, I'm talking about the rabble. When you allowed the rabble to leave Egypt, did you consult with me? You never consulted with me. Therefore, you're at fault. Not that he was punished for this, but it's due to your decision allowing them to come out. So we explained, why did Moshe allow them the rabble to come out? Again, this is part of the blind spot, because one of the reasons why we went to Egypt was because the story with Sodom, when the king of Sodom said to Avram Avinu, give me the people, you take the material, and then Avram says, I will not take a thread or a bootstrap. He had the ability at that moment to take these people and convert them to monotheism. Ultimately, these people were destroyed with Sodom because Avram did not take them under the wings of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence. So the Gemara says, because of that, that precipitated the exile of Egypt, that we went and we became idolaters there. Here he could have converted them, and he did not. Therefore, your children are going to be challenged in the setting. They themselves are going to become idolaters. That's the meter connected meter. That's measure for measure. Okay? So Moshe says, if we went to Egypt because we had the ability to convert people to monotheism, here Paro is sending out hundreds of thousands of rabble. I have the ability to convert them, and they want to come. Am I not going to convert them? That's the reason why he allowed them to come. Except Hashem says, no, you should have consulted with me. Even though it was legitimate what the way you processed it, but you should have consulted. Why? Because by Avram Avinu there wasn't a Jewish people. So you want to bring a fifth column into an existing people. Today there's a Klal Yisrael. Bringing this element into the Jewish people, they're going to topple the apple cart. Therefore, you're at fault. It's due to your decision. That's why it happened. But again, after everything's said and done, why were we not destroyed? Why were we not destroyed? The Gemara says, because Yisrael. It's clear the rabble are the ones who actually instigated it. Because when Moshe was delayed, he said, "This is your God, Israel." They should have said, "This is our God." Why is it your God? The answer is this is the rabble speaking. It's not the Klal Yisrael speaking. Therefore, the liability to them wasn't as serious because it wasn't our choice. We were actually drawn into this by the rabble. Therefore, there was a place for a kapara that we should be atoned. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been a basis for tshuva. So again, the rabble caused it because they introduced it. And for that reason, that's why the level of liability was that there was an escape clause that we could be forgiven.
But yet, Rabbi,